Good morning student, welcome in the Swayam Fundamental of Computational Biology. Today I will be discuss about basics of respiratory system in humans. Every system in our body plays a critical role in our ability to function, but the respiratory system is particularly very important. The respiratory system allows us to breathe. Without it we can't take the oxygen that helps us survive, and we can't expel the carbon dioxide that can result in dangerous health issues. This is the human respiratory system. How we respire? The respiratory system is a vital part of human body, as it supplies oxygen to the different parts of the body which is necessary for survival. The respiratory system consists of the set of organs and tissues involved in the uptake of oxygen from the atmosphere and the release of carbon dioxide generated during aerobic respiration. This gas exchange is also called breathing or external respiration. The body's breathing mechanism is composed of the nose, mouth, trachea or windpipe, which collectively serve as the airways, a pair of lungs and diaphragm. Each cell in our body needs oxygen to move, build, reproduce and turn food into energy. The respiratory system supplies oxygen to all parts of our body through the circulatory system. Every time we inhale, our blood absorbs and then circulates the air all over our body. The respiratory system is basically the network of our organ and tissues that help us breathe. It concludes our airways, lungs and blood vessels. The muscles that power our lungs are also part of the respiratory system. These parts works together to move oxygen throughout the body and clean out waste gases like carbon dioxide. There are 4 essential requirements for the respiratory system to function. First one is the respiratory system surface must be moist. Second is the surface must be thin walled to diffusion of air can rapidly occur. Third one, it must have a source of oxygen. The respiratory surface must be in contact with the transport system that carries oxygen. Then function of the respiratory system, how it function? Through pulmonary ventilation. Air comes in through our noses and mouth and then passes through the pharynx, larynx and trachea. Before entering the lungs, when we inhale, the air goes back out of our bodies by the way the trachea or windpipe connects the pharynx and larynx to our lungs. Now, this leads us to our third function called internal respiration. Internal respiration exchange gases between the blood stream and tissues. The blood stream carries oxygen to cell and expels carbon dioxide. The respiratory system also help us with sound, and that is the fourth function of our list. When we inhale, air goes from our lungs to the larynx, more commonly known as the voice box. When air moves through the vocal cords, they vibrate and create sound. The respiratory system help us smell, that is the fifth and the last function. Then smell. Ever wonder why you can't smell anything when you have a clogged nose? It is because little fiber in your nose, the olfactory fiber, have been blocked by mucus or some other substance. Air travelling through the respiratory system comprises of the different steps. In first step, we take air in through our nose and mouth. This air goes down to the trachea, also known as the windpipe, towards the lungs. Then once the air trachea reaches in the lungs, it moves into two smaller tubes called bronchi. There is one bronchus in each lung. The bronchi then split into smaller tubes called bronchioles, which are the air which the air moves into. At the end of each bronchiole, the air ends up the microscopic air sacs called alveoli. In ventilation, the process of ventilation or breathing involves the movement of ribs, the bones protecting the respiratory system, intercostal muscle, muscle between the ribs, the diaphragm. Diaphragm is the smooth muscle at the bottom of the rib cage. Now, inhalation, that means breathing in. When we inhale, the diaphragm and the intercostal muscle contact, causing the rib cage to move outwards and upwards. This increases the volume of the lungs, which decreases the pressure of the lungs. As the pressure inside the lungs is lower than outside the body, air is drawn into the lungs. This equalizes the pressure. In exhalation, that means breathing out. When we exhale air, the diaphragm and the intercostal muscle relax, causing the rib cage to move downwards and inwards. The volume of the lungs decreases, which increases the pressure of the lungs. As the pressure in the lungs is greater than outside the body, air is forced out of the lungs. This equalizes the pressure. You can see in this picture inhalation and exhalation. Now, we will see the what does the respiratory system do. As discussed previously, the respiratory system has many functions. Beside helping us inhale, breathe in and exhale, breathe out, it allows us to talk and to smell. Warms air to match our body temperature and moistures it into humidity level our body needs. Delivers oxygen to the cells in our body. Removes waste gases including carbon dioxide from our body when we exhale, protects our airways from harmful substances and irritants. Then what are the parts of the respiratory system? The respiratory system has many different parts that work together to help us breathe. Each group of parts has many separate components, which includes the mouth and nose, opening that pull air from outside. Then sinuses, hollow areas between the bones in our head that help regulate the temperature and humidity of the air we inhale. Then pharynx or throat tube that deliver air from our mouth and nose to the trachea or windpipe. Trachea, that passage connecting our throat and lungs. Then bronchial tubes, the bronchial tubes at the bottom of our windpipe that connect into each lung, and lungs, two organs that remove oxygen from air and pass it into our blood. From our lungs and blood stream delivers oxygen to all our organs and our tissues. Muscles and bones help move the air we inhale into and out of our lungs. Some of the bones and muscles in the respiratory system include our diaphragm, that muscles that helps our lungs pull in air and push it out. Then ribs, bones and surrounding it protect our lungs, and when we breathe out, our blood carries carbon dioxide and other waste out of the body. Other components that work with the lungs and blood vessels include alveoli. Alveoli are tiny air sacs in the lungs where the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide take place. Bronchioles, bronchioles are the small branches of the bronchial tubes that lead to the alveoli. Then capillaries, capillaries are the blood vessels in the alveoli walls that move oxygen and carbon dioxide. Lung lobes, section of the lungs, 3 lobes in the right lung and 2 in the left lung. Then pleura, thin sacs that surround each lung lobe and separate our lungs from the chest wall. Some of the other components of our respiratory system are cilia. Cilia are the tiny hairs that move in wave like motion to filter dust and other irritants out of our airways. Another one is epiglottis. Epiglottis is a tissue flap at the entrance to the trachea that closes when we swallow to keep food and liquids out of our airways. Larynx and voice box, it is a hollow organ that allows us to talk and make sounds when air moves in and out. The nose knows, it really does. The nose and its nasal cavity govern our sense of smell. With it, humans can differentiate between 5,000 and 10,000 different scents. The nose has an internal and external structure. The external structure contains the root, which is located between the eyebrow the bridge which connects the root to the rest of the nose, and the dorsum nasi which extend from the root to the tip of the nose. The external nose also contain the frontal, nasal and maxillary bones, as well as the septal and major alar cartilages. You can see here the nose external structure. Then nasal cavity. We know the internal nose as the nasal cavity. It is lined with hair and a mucous membrane that acts as a human air filter. The cavity warms moisture and filters air that enters the body before it reaches the lungs. But that is not all. The nose also has an intricate sinus system. Sinuses produce mucus to moisture the inside nose and protect us from dirt, dust and other organisms. There are different type of sinuses. There are two maxillary sinuses located on both sides of the nose just below the cheeks. They are collectively the largest sinus and one that can cause some pain. The maxillary sinus drains into the nose through a small hole called the ostium. When the ostia become clogged, that can result in sinusitis or a sinus infection. The ethmoid sinus is located between the nose and eyes, and the frontal sinus is located above each eyes. For most of you, the mouth is the easiest structure to remember because we use it all the time. We ingest food through our mouth, which is also called the oral cavity. Small glands and 3 pairs of salivary gland keep the mouth moist. We need the moisture to soften and swallow food. There are also 2 membranes in the mouth, the gums and the tongue. The gums support our teeth and the tongue contains our taste buds. Pharynx. Now, let us move on to the pharynx. The pharynx has 3 separate sections: the nasopharynx, the oropharynx and the hypopharynx. The nasopharynx, located above the soft palate, is mechanism that lets you breathe through your nose. The oropharynx connects the nose and the back of the mouth to the esophagus, and the hypopharynx is the passageway for food, and food goes from the mouth through the hypopharynx and esophagus and then into the stomach. Larynx. Let us talk about the larynx, the last part of the upper respiratory tract we will discuss. We know the larynx as the voice box because without it we would not be able to talk. But the larynx does much more. The larynx allows air to pass through the respiratory tract, but it also protects the trachea by ensuring food and drink do not block the airways. The larynx itself has 3 sections: the supraglottis, glottis and subglottis. Let us take a look at the lower respiratory tract. Lower respiratory tract, the lower respiratory tract also has four main components: trachea, lungs, bronchi and diaphragm. Let us start with the trachea. Trachea is the main airways to the lungs and is more commonly referred to as the windpipe. The trachea connects the larynx to the left and right bronchi in the lungs. We need our lungs to pull in air and breathe. We talked earlier about the body's need to pull in oxygen and push out carbon dioxide, and that is what our lungs do for us. Our lungs are an indispensable part of our breathing system. The lungs connect to the trachea via the left and right bronchi. They are protected by the sternum, rib cage and the vertebrate. The purpose of perfusion helps fluid pass to an organ or tissue. The alveoli produce a fluid called surfactant, which helps prevent the lungs from collapsing. Tidal volume represents the normal volume of air that moves in and out of the body when we inhale and exhale. The lungs have an intricate system of members and function that help them stay healthy and in proper working order. The pleura, a membrane on the inside and outside of the lung, secretes a fluid that lets the lungs move against the rib cage. When we breathe, the right lung has 3 lobes and the left lung has 2. That is because the left lung must make room for the heart. All the lobes have some same function, as they all bring oxygen into and remove carbon dioxide from the blood stream. Let us move on to the bronchi. So, the bronchi, there is a tube in each lung called a bronchus that connects to the trachea. There are 2 main bronchi that are extension of trachea that helps push air to and from the lungs. You can see here the trachea and bronchus. The diaphragm is the primary muscle used in breathing, contracting in and out as you breathe. The diaphragm is located below the heart and lungs. It has 3 main openings and they each provide a critical function. That is because these openings let other structure pass between the chest and the abdomen. The esophageal opening provides a passageway for the esophagus and vagus nerve. The aortic opening allows the aorta and thoracic duct to pass through. The aorta transports blood from the heart and is the body main artery, while the thoracic duct is the lymphatic system's main vessel. Now that we understand the upper and lower respiratory tract, Let us take a look at the respiratory system zones. In respiratory system zone, the respiratory system has a conducting and a respiratory zone. So, in conducting zone, the conducting zone provides a continuous passageway for incoming and outgoing air to travel. The conducting zone consists of the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi and bronchioles. It is important to remember that all structure in the conducting zone only deal with air. In respiratory zone, as we talked about the gas exchange system earlier, and that is where the respiratory zone comes. In the respiratory zone is only involved in oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange and consists of the bronchioles, alveolar ducts and alveoli. The alveoli are very small air sacs in the site of the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. The bronchi are the main passageways attached to the lungs and the bronchiole connects the bronchi to the alveoli. Now, that we understand the respiratory zone, let us talk more about the ventilation. So, the ventilation is the process by which air moves in and out of the body. We breathe in, that is inhaling, we breathe out, that is exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling each has opposite movement. Inhale and diaphragm moves downward, in exhale and the diaphragm moves up. When you inhale, the ribs push out and air fills the lungs. In exhale and the ribs relax as air comes out of the lungs. You can see in this pictorial representation the inhalation and exhalation. Hyperventilation and hypoventilation can occur while breathing and both can make you sick. Hyperventilation happen when you breathe faster than normal. When you breathe fast, you take too much oxygen in the blood and that can make you feel faint or dizzy. During hypoventilation, you are breathing too slowly and that result too much carbon dioxide entering into the bloodstream that can result in fatigue, headache and other illness. See the hypoventilation and hyperventilation process in the pictorial representation. Now, what conditions affect the respiratory system? Many conditions can affect the organ and tissues that make up the respiratory system. Some develop due to irritants we breathe in from the air, including viruses or bacteria that cause infection. Others occur as a result of disease or getting older. The condition that can cause inflammation, for example, swelling, irritation and pain, or otherwise affect the respiratory system, that include allergies, inhaling protein, such as dust, mold and pollen can cause respiratory allergies. In some people, these proteins can cause inflammation in our airways. Asthma, a chronic long term disorder. Asthma cause inflammation in our airways that can make breathing difficulties. And then infection can lead to pneumonia, inflammation of the lungs or bronchitis, inflammation of the bronchial tubes. Common respiratory infection include the flu, that is influenza or cold. Then aging, lung capacity decreases as we get older. Damage to the respiratory system can cause breathing problem. Diseases, respiratory disorder include lung cancer and other chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases. These illnesses can harm the respiratory system's ability to deliver oxygen throughout the body and filter out waste gases. In every breath, human take the particles that may be deposited on the respiratory tract and exhale particles that may contain pathogen. So many diseases are there. Respiratory disorder include lung cancer and chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases. These illnesses can harm the respiratory system ability to deliver oxygen throughout the body and filter out waste gases. So, common respiratory system diseases are asthma. Our airways narrow and make too much mucus. Then bronchitis, inflammation and infection make our bronchial walls thicker. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, this long term condition gets worse over time. It includes bronchitis and emphysema. These are the few picture you can see. Then pneumonia, an infection causing inflammation to our alveoli. They might fill up with fluid or pus. In tuberculosis, a bacterium causes this dangerous infection. It usually affects our lungs, but might also involve our kidney also, spine and brain. Lung cancer, cells in our lung change and grow into a tumor. This often happen because of smoking or other chemicals we have breathed it. Cystic fibrosis, this disease is caused by a problem in our gene and gets worse over time. It causes lung infection that do not go away. Pleural effusion, too much fluid builds up between the tissues that line our lungs and chest. Idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, in this our lung tissues becomes scared and can't work the way it should. Sarcoidosis, tiny champ of the inflammatory cells called granuloma form often in our lungs and lymph nodes. Pneumonia and other diseases you can see here. This is the lung cancer. The symptom you can see here, the cystic fibrosis, the genetic disorder, then pleural effusions, too much fluid builds up between the tissues that line our lungs and chest. This condition develops when that lung tissue becomes thick and shift from unknown region. Over time, these changes can cause permanent scarring in our lungs. Then sarcoidosis. While the causes of sarcoidosis are not known, it is associated with increased immune system activity. Now, how you can keep your respiratory system healthy? Avoid pollutant, smoke, eat healthy food, exercise regularly and go for walk in a fresh air. So, in this way you can keep your respiratory system healthy.